It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and texts for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed, and from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is
The Hyperspace.
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome in, podcast pioneers, to the Hyperspace. Podcasting in the 25th century, the interweb's first and only podcast. My name's Matt.
I'm Jared.
Jared, what's up?
Well, I'll tell you what's up. I'll tell you who's not up.
What?
Mike.
Who?
Mike's not up.
You know, to be fair, we did have him for one episode last week.
We actually had him for 2 episodes in a row, I think, didn't we?
No. Well, did we? We had Dragon Slayer and James Bond. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, the planets aligned.
It's not a streak that could have continued, of course.
No, I know. I didn't have expectations.
So, no, Mike's not with us tonight, but there are a few people who are. And we're going to talk about those people right now. Going in alphabetical order from the Hyperspace
Is that
Network's
alphabetical first name or last name? Because that really throws a wrench in it.
Well, I'm going first names. We
right.
don't do last names on the Hyperspace, Matt. You know that.
Yeah, it's been dropped a few times. That's all right.
We got to preserve our secret identities.
That's right.
So coming to us from Hyperspace's very own Cassian Chronicles and Carbonite Chronicles, we have with us tonight. He is known as the Collector. His name is Brian. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And from the much missed and vaunted Sidetracked podcast, as well as a frequent contributor here on the Hyperspace Network's very own Good, Bad, and Ugly, we have with us Deke. Deke, welcome to the show.
What's up, guys? Jared, Matt, how you guys doing? Brian,
What's going on,
nice
guys?
to see you again.
Good to see you again.
So this is kind of like I was saying, it's like a superhero team up that we don't see too often. Brian has been on some of our shows. Deke's been on other of our shows, but we all haven't podcasted together before. So what could bring us together like this, Matt? What event brings us together?
It's almost destiny, one might say.
Would you say it's like a let's see, is it a touchpad of destiny?
No.
Or perhaps a touch screen of destiny?
I think we're getting closer. It's maybe something more primitive, something more feral.
A feral?
Something more Gen X.
A cat of destiny?
Yeah.
A feral cat? No, that's terrible.
They are problem. They're disgusting, by the way, if you ever run into feral cats.
Listen, of course, we're going to be talking today about the Dial of Destiny. And we have to talk about who's not here for a moment. Mike. Mike, he said that, his Star Wars boycott did not extend to Indiana Jones. He just had very little interest in watching this, or he was in no hurry to see it. So, we respect Mike and his decision. But we can't wait around for Mike to get his act together. So we have to keep these shows timely. I know we're in the 25th century, but we want to shoot them back to our 21st century fans so they have a timely podcast to listen to. So we're going to talk about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the 5th Indiana Jones film in the series. And I'd like to start by saying I had the pleasure of watching this movie about a week ago with Brian and Deke in the same theater.
Wow.
We all had a big group. Brian was on vacation from his home in Tennessee down to Florida, and we all managed to get together to go see it. Now, Matt, your experience was somewhat different.
I had a variable going on. Now, the only thing I wanted for my birthday back in May, I told my wife, was to see this movie, and preferably to see it by myself. However,
wife doesn't want to hear that, by the way.
well, you know what? I'll tell you why. Because she has never seen any Indiana Jones movies, and she's like, well, what if we just take all the kids and me? I said, how about that? Sounds awful. And I go by myself. So we negotiated it down to her and my son. Now, my son is just turning 8, and he's never seen any Indiana Jones movies. And I've tried to like prime it and be like, hey, you want to watch Raiders? No interest. So whatever. We bring him, and not to tell how I felt about the movie, but when he left, he thought it was great. And the first thing he said to me was, I want to watch the other ones right away. So he loved it. My wife loved it, and I'll get to my reaction shortly.
Matt, I'm just glad to hear you didn't watch it on a cell phone, to be honest with you. So
that would have been the backup.
Yeah.
He's going to be showing Indy's pregnancy test.
Oh, I have a screenshot of that from Temple of Doom.
But
that
brings up an interesting point
the
about
diaphragm
these
of destiny.
Okay. Diaphragm of destiny. That's good. Very quick.
But that brings up a really interesting point about these movies, like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and things. We grew up on this stuff. We were kids when it came out. And it's awesome to hear that a kid who had no skin in the game loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get into it, but I'll tell you this. Going to see a action adventure movie in the theater with real stunts and exciting action that really doesn't stop from start to finish is kind of a rare thing these days. And with things like YouTube and video game systems, to get him out and to see a movie like this, I think he hasn't really seen a lot. So I think these are great movies for everybody, but to your point, it's awesome for kids. And maybe we do take a heavy hand because we have too much skin in the game.
I just wanted to chime in and say that, Jared talked about me and Brian and him getting a chance to see it. We saw it in the Dolby Atmos Theater down here in Florida, and it was a fantastic presentation, just for the record. Again, Absolutely. I will be getting to my thoughts on the movie also, but as far as the presentation goes, because I saw it a second time on Sunday, 3 days after we saw it, and it wasn't as great as a presentation. So if you do get the chance and you do want to see it, I would highly recommend the Dolby Atmos theaters, because that was a fantastic presentation.
Yeah, that was one of the best sounding theaters I've ever been in my life.
Yeah,
I can imagine. Should we dive in?
Let's go.
I miss the desert. I miss the sea. I miss waking up every morning, wondering what wonderful adventure the new day will bring to us.
Those days have come and gone.
Perhaps not.
So this had a lot of questionable buildup because, and I know, Jared, you recently rewatched Crystal Skull, and Brian, I'm sure you probably rewatched it 8 times before the movie that day.
No,
Crystal Skull.
What?
I can't remember. Last time I saw it a couple years ago.
I haven't seen Crystal Skull since it came out. I haven't rewatched it. I hadn't had a lot of real interest to rewatch it, and I kind of went into this one a little hopeful but trepidatious. I like the trailers. I thought the trailers were fun and they looked right. They felt Indiana Jones, and God knows that the director is awesome and can put a good movie together. So I was very hopeful walking into it, but I can tell you I was very nervous in my expectations.
That's very fair. I think I expressed this on the podcast a few weeks ago. It's like, why am I dreading a new Indiana Jones film? Why am I not excited for it? And so what's wrong with me? Well, I mean, I don't want to, we're all holding back here, I think.
I'm not going to.
No, that's fine. Okay. So let's go in. Okay. Deke, I feel like somebody's holding the reins here. So
no, I said this to you in person. I mean, well, yeah, I mean, we got a chance to talk about it, because you took off after the movie. But when I saw you the next day, it's like I don't really understand the amount of bad press that this movie had beforehand. Now, I'm going to tell you straight up, and I'm going to defend why I feel this way. But the movie is plain and simple, just okay to me. It's right down the line, just okay. For me, it never got great and it never got crappy. So it's right down the line. I have not like insanely bad things to say about it, but I don't have a lot of great things to say about it either. But as far as the press, and I've been really trying the past couple of years to avoid trailers, especially if I know it's a movie I'm going to see. I don't see the point of watching the trailer for me personally, because if I know I'm already going to see it, I don't want to spoil it for myself. And I've been enjoying my experiences a lot more lately, not watching trailers. So I really tried to avoid, besides the teaser trailer, which everyone has to watch, but I really stayed away from trailers. And, you and I would bump into each other at work in the hallway, and you would really kind of you were really my conduit to some of the bad reviews that were going on, from the Cannes pre-screening that they did out of, they weren't actually in they weren't one of the entries, but they did it out of entry, and they got really bad press from that. And then a lot of people were already kind of pre-making up their mind about the film. And I really didn't see why people were being so negative about it. It wasn't that bad. It just wasn't that good. And that's kind of my opening statement.
Yeah, it might have suffered under the weight of expectations a bit.
Yeah. Somewhat, yeah. I just wonder.
It's not all of it, but yeah, some of it.
I have to think that maybe the premiere at Cannes was a misstep, because I think they were probably thinking that maybe that it was going to be better. It was going to go better for them than it did. By all accounts, that Harrison Ford, he received quite a warm ovation at the film festival. But the movie, I mean, the critics came out pretty much right away and made their thoughts known. And I was like, well, why did you do that? A month before the movie's released, you've just shot your big toe off with a gun. I mean, I didn't understand that. And it was a little discouraging because, I had hoped that, like James Mangold, we get a fresh set of eyes on it. I'd hoped that the early reactions would have been different. So I think that probably fed into some of my trepidation about going into the film.
It was a weird place to have a premiere. I mean, that's usually where more artsy films are premiered. And, I think had Indiana Jones premiered at more like, like a D23 or some kind of other, like, more audience that would be geared towards wanting to see an Indiana Jones 5 rather than people who are probably, sitting there scratching their chin like, well, already pre-making up their mind, and this isn't artistic enough, and why is this even being premiered here? I think it was a weird place for it to show off its first time. But like I said, it was way too much bad press beforehand. I think it's a movie that you should go see and make up for yourself. Or just listen to this podcast and we'll make up your mind for you. But yes. But it just doesn't get garnet enough for hatred. Hatred I don't understand for this movie. It just doesn't even deserve that much.
Well, the last thing I'll say about the film festival is that last year they premiered Maverick at Cannes to pretty much universal acclaim. And, everybody, even film snobs, loved Maverick, right? And Maverick went on to make over $1 billion.
Yeah, but that's actually a great thing to bring up, because, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit in this podcast, but I mean, you're also talking about yet another, maybe not 5 worth, but only 2, but you're talking about another legacy character. You're talking about we're going through a resurgence between Keanu Reeves and Tom Cruise and Harrison Ford. I've never in my life grown up with action heroes that are over the 50 range, and I think that's a pretty amazing thing that's going on in action films right now, whether they're hanging on to their youth, clawing and hanging on to as much as they can. But we are seeing action heroes that, super spies that are still doing impossible missions over the age of 60. That's never heard of before. You and I, all four of us probably grew up on Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and they were at the prime of their health. And now we're seeing people who are still doing stunts and actions. And the difference between Maverick, where you have someone like Tom Cruise, who's still, yes, 20 years younger, but he's still doing all his own stunts, and all that stuff is done for real. And the difference between they're showing action sequences that are shot specifically in IMAX cameras, and they don't want to hold anything back. They're not hiding anything. They're putting it in your face. We're doing this stuff for real, versus some of the stuff I want to get into. There was so much green screen and special effects in this movie to cover up a lot of stuff. And I think that's the difference why Maverick, which also was credited for saving the movie theater going experience coming out of COVID. So there's a couple of different reasons why I think that got a standing ovation and probably earned its applause versus some of the stuff I hope we can discuss in this podcast, which is a lot of green screening and CGI and de-aging and some other things. So, but
Brian, give me your 30,000 foot view of the movie.
So I did enjoy it. I liked it more the second time I saw it than the first time. The first time I was just trying to put it all together. What's going on here? Just walking through a movie, and it was long. 2.5 hours. That felt a little long for an indie movie, although it did play a little faster the second time around. I did like that it did play better the second time around, but there was a lot going on there. But one thing that kind of took me out of it a little bit was when you mentioned the de-aging of Harrison Ford. My wife saw it and thought, oh man, this is great. This is so cool. And it is cool, but there are better deep fakes on YouTube of Harrison Ford. And it felt like the lighting around the eyes or something. And it happened when he was driving that car. They kept flashing the light on his eyes, but nobody else. There was no other light around. It was just on his eyes. And it just looked kind of weird to me and kind of took me out of it. But then the special effects, well, one thing about that de-aging, one thing with it that really kind of bugged me was they didn't change his voice. They didn't go to a younger voice, and I found it, it kind of threw me off. I was like, why didn't they just alter his voice just a little bit and go back? Right. You have the technology to do it. You did it to his face. You have the technology to do it to his mouth or to his sound.
They can do it for a Val Kilmer documentary. They can probably do it for Indiana
That's what
Jones.
I said.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
He had an old man's voice the entire time, which was taking me out of the deepfake quite a bit. The movie, I did like the whole deepfake sequence, though I felt it went on a long time, but that's fine. I'll tell you this, I'm going to jump into one of my main issues why, and I think I kind of agree with Deke in the sense that this movie felt very average in that sense. When I go back to Raiders and I go back to The Last Crusade, the goals of the movies, the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail, kind of come with built-in like theologic credibility right off the bat. There's a superstition around them. There's a mysticism around them that even if you're not like Christian, you kind of understand the heavy weight of what these symbols mean in the movie. And this movie comes to the table with the Dial of Destiny, whatever the official name of it was. And it just didn't feel like an artifact that was nearly as important or as like it didn't have the gravity of a Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant. And I'm trying to buy into how important this is because they're telling me it's important, but I don't have that kind of like feeling that this is a major, huge, important artifact. And nobody seems to really even know about it except for a few people. So in that sense, I felt through the whole movie, although it was the point of the movie, that this artifact isn't that impressive until you finally see what it does. Because the buildup of what it can do didn't have that kind of like, holy crap, this is the Holy Grail, or holy crap, this is the Ark of the Covenant. This is the Dial of Destiny, which is a little piece of metal that they keep finding on a train and other places. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it almost felt to me like you didn't really understand how important that was to anybody until they're sitting in 200 BC, watching that big battle rage on, and then you realize that Indiana Jones has dreamed about this his whole life to see this, or to, he's studied it and is really super interested in it, and you kind of get it that was like, maybe that was what his focus was all these years that you didn't see. It was kind of off screen, right? You just see him going after all these cool things like the Ark and the Grail and the stones, and
Well, one of the challenges that they had making this movie was, how do you present an elderly Indiana Jones and make him interesting and credible and still get the job done? And I have some, after digesting this movie, I have some complaints about what they did with the character. Now, I know we're jumping all around in plot and all that stuff, and we're not going sequential from the start of the end to the end of the movie, but
red alert,
I know.
spoiler alert, spoiler. We got the spoiler fedora. Okay, there's no spoilers.
Can I just say something? I have not been part of a spoiler episode, and I have seen and only heard this gag for the 2 years I've been listening to this podcast, and I have been waiting to see how this gag plays out, and that was a letdown. I was hoping for a monkey or something. I've heard the legendary monkey, and that was a letdown.
Spoiler monkey. Yeah, I'm sorry.
That was the dial of destiny of spoiler.
Oh, dang.
That's fair. All right, well, next time we'll play that better.
We'll do it better next time. I promise.
So here's one of my main complaints of the movie, and I'm not going to get over it, and I'm pretty steadfast in this. Indiana Jones is one of my favorite characters of all. In fact, he is my favorite fictional character of all time, Captain Kirk being number 2. And the one thing that Indiana Jones has always been in all the movies is aware of what's going on. He can read a room. He is in control. Even when nobody knows what's happening, Indiana Jones takes control and knows what to do. And in this movie, maybe because they're playing up the elderly part of him, he felt like he was clueless in every single spot he wound up. Every time he was in a position of danger, or he was trying to protect his goddaughter, I felt like it's an old man rushing into a room saying, "You gotta leave her alone," and not understanding anything about what's happening or what's going on. And he had no presence. And every time something's happening, it's almost like he's playing the elderly, like, "You get back here, young lady," versus like, "Holy crap, the world's collapsing. We got to get the hell out of here." He never had that in control feeling to me. He always felt like an old man being dragged along, somewhat out of his mind, and not really like he had no understanding what was happening around him. Specifically,
okay,
no, go on.
No,
go on. I'll go on this all day. So
there's instances of the movie where he's absolutely in control, and he's saving the day. They're in that chamber where all the methane is, and he figures it out. He's like, "No, get away from the door. What are you doing? Come over here. This is about," and he figures that out. And I see what you mean. I mean, you're probably talking about when they're at the auction.
The auction's there.
Yeah.
Outside in the street where her gangster boyfriend is trying to her gangster fiance is trying to shoot them or take. You're right.
Yeah, there's fireworks going off outside my house.
There was a lot of moments though where I felt it was a very elderly, like they're trying specifically to make him that kind of like clueless old man.
Here's my thing, and why it doesn't bug me as much. He is old, and he is reluctantly drawn into this. Like he's not looking for. He's not looking for any more chases, through the streets of Tangiers or, trekking across the Middle East.
Yeah, I think you would prefer to take a baseball bat to his neighbor's door.
Yes, yes. In the movie, Indy is 70 years old. I mean, Harrison Ford is 80, but in 1969, the character of Indiana Jones is 70 years old. He was born in 1899. He's not a 35-year-old guy anymore. He's older than my dad. And that part of the film didn't bother me. And I still thought he acquitted himself well when he was put in these situations. Like at the beginning of the film, when Helena locks him in the storage room, he starts, he basically does what he did in Raiders. He kicks over all those shelves so he can get a way out of there. And then he, hits the guy in the throat with the stool. He's reacting to the situation he's been placed in, but he's not there of his own, he's not there, but he's there because he's in a spot and he figures out a way to get himself out of the spot. So, I mean, I see your point about what you're saying about sometimes he felt like just an old man stumbling through this adventure. But at the same time, I think there's other parts that show him to still be capable and in control of what's going on.
Matt, just to ask you a follow-up question, did you feel like, because I know a lot of people who've reviewed the movie poorly have talked about how the Phoebe Waller-Bridge character took over a lot more of the action sequences, and repeatedly was having dialogue pieces where she was, she was the one figuring things out, or she was the one rescuing, or, and this is something I want to talk about later on, but I mean, he spends a good portion of the third act tied up and not really doing anything while she is doing the motorcycle, chase underneath the airplane and stuff like that. I mean, did you feel like, compared to the previous 4 films, like he was sharing the action sequences a little more than he probably should have for an Indiana Jones movie, since he has the title over the marquee? Or what was your where did you feel like that opinion was coming from?
I went into this knowing, some of the reviews, she was really getting blasted a lot, and to be quite honest, she didn't really bother me in the movie that much. In fact, almost not at all. And to be fair, I think he had the character Indiana Jones had a lot of action in this movie. He certainly didn't sit it out. And he certainly, even though in the third act, yes, he was out of commission a lot of it, but I think he earned his stripes in this movie still. And I think,
yeah, you get shot.
Yeah.
he got shot.
I really don't think that she stole the action.
Okay.
In fact, I'll tell you this, one of the sadder moments for me as an Indiana Jones fan, and this isn't a critique of the movie, it's almost sad to see my favorite character getting old and going away, was the motorcycle scene where she's chasing the plane. Because in the other movies, that would have been him chasing it, and that would have been a big John Williams moment. It's him on horseback chasing the truck in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And Indy doesn't get to have that moment. And to be fair, he shouldn't, because he's an old man. And sometimes, it makes sense that he doesn't do that. But she didn't bother me that much. I thought she was fine. I thought she was a little plucky and a little maybe too one-dimensional. I don't think she was that interesting of a character. I think they tried to make her more interesting than she came off. But she didn't bother me like the reviews tore her up about.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I just want to say that wasn't my opinion. I was just asking if maybe that's what it was. So sorry, I just want to put that out there.
No, I think
I was sitting there watching it thinking, I wish that was Daisy Ridley.
Yeah, see, now Brian told me that the other night, and that's I think Lucasfilm is already pushing it by making Indiana Jones another aging hero who's lost his son and his marriage has crumbled, which has nothing to do with the Dial of Destiny. But if you look at it in a larger sort of meta sense, Han Solo lost his son and his marriage dissolved, and they're both played by Harrison Ford.
I was thinking it too when I watched the movie. I was like, this seems very, very reminiscent of something I've seen recently.
He even had a speech in it that was very reminiscent of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything,
Well, you can't. I'm obviously not saying that Harrison Ford's not allowed to play similar roles, but this is very, Star Wars and Indiana Jones have always been very adjacent to each other.
Yeah.
And this perhaps was maybe a bit lazy, that, okay, well, let's just Kylo Ren his kid, and then we don't have to pay Karen Allen for more than a day's work. But I will say that, okay, I mean, yeah, I don't think Shia LaBeouf was ever in consideration to come back because, he's extremely, he lost his mind a long time ago and nobody wants to touch him with a 10-foot pole. But I will say that when the scene in the movie where Indy is talking about Mutt is probably one of my favorite scenes in the film with Harrison Ford's acting, where she's like, well, what would you do if you could go back? He's like, I'd stop my son from enlisting. And she's like, oh, did he enlist to, make you proud? And he goes, no, he enlisted to piss me off. And she's like, well, how would you stop him? And then his voice cracks and he's like, I tell him he was going to die. Harrison really, there's several scenes in this movie where he acts more than he ever has in this role. That moment, you couldn't have delivered that 40 years ago because, you see his face, the lines in his face, and, he's old, he's seen a lot, and that's just his.
He's also in a better position now, though, Jared. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but by doing a fifth film now, he's already got, I know, everyone on this podcast and probably millions of other people's hearts in his hand. You know what I mean? He's already earned a lot of people's respect. So when you see somebody, and this is maybe a topic I want to jump into next, since we're talking about his age and stuff, but you're talking about the deconstruction of one of our favorite heroes. And so when you see somebody like that you've grown up with for 3 decades, and you see the wear and tear of life on his face and in his voice and in his emotions, you're with him at that point, I feel. So I feel like this is probably the first movie that would be allowed to do those type of emotional sequences because we've lived through his life with him vicariously. So when you hear about loss and things like that, I don't think it would work in Raiders. We haven't got to know anybody, you know what I mean? Exactly. We haven't lived life with him. But when we've lived decades with this same character, and we've grown to love him, I feel like he's earned those type of sequences.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
It's like the emotional impact of losing Han Solo in, Force Awakens. I mean, it's a little different, but you're not losing him. But
it's this unique, just what Deke was saying. For us, these characters have, we grew up in this time when these amazing characters sprung into our young consciousness, and as we've grown to be men in our 40s now, we've also seen the people that we've admired in these movies, Harrison Ford chief among them, come to this kind of place in their career. And the reason I have affection for this movie, and the reason I definitely will put it over Crystal Skull any day of the week is, and especially this hit me the second time I watched it. It was whenever Harrison was up there, I realized this is the last time he's going to play this character. And for me, the most important thing that they did was, I don't think they gave us a Last Jedi kick in the balls at the end of it. I love the scene with Harrison when he's looking around at the Roman battle happening around him. And it's just his face. He's like, I've waited to see this my whole life. And he's just looking around. And when I was in the theater the second time, especially, I was like, man, take your bow, buddy. I feel like this was a movie that, nobody wanted Crystal Skull to be the last movie. And this movie is not perfect. But for me, there are moments in this movie that are perfect Indiana Jones moments. And I'm glad now that I have them. Could they have been put into a better package? Certainly. But it's those kind of things where I feel like, I just like, thank you that I have this now. Cause Harrison is 80 years old. maybe we've got 10 more years with him. But this is the last time he's going to be on screen as Indiana Jones.
Not if he keeps flying planes the way he
Yeah.
does.
Well, apparently
we might have him for another week.
Well, apparently he lives through all this stuff, so he's just
bulletproof.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? And I know I know you just mentioned the ending, and you probably don't want to discuss our feelings on the ending yet. But we were talking about his age, and I know that in some of the interviews leading up to this movie, Harrison Ford really wanted to put the age factor as a frontline priority of something he wanted to address in this film. And I guess I wanted to get your guys' take on that because, I didn't love the movie, and there's not a lot of things that I really can point to in the film that I said, well, I really like that. But one of the few things that I thought was very bold and brave, I thought was him starting the movie off basically topless and showing off the, I know we're going to giggle about this, but I think it's actually an extremely brave thing to put front and center. It's not even like they had him small in the frame. I mean, he filled the frame with he's still in great shape. Obviously,
he is in great shape.
He's still in. The way I'm describing.
He has abs, for God's sake.
Yeah, I know, and I don't even have that. He's still kicking my butt.
No abs
but
here.
I mean, I do love the fact that they put that so front and center, and also as far as like the deconstruction of our hero, I mean, that's something that Mangold, I think, probably was one of the reasons he was brought in. He did such a good job when he did that with Logan, where he takes these heroes that we've seen in multiple movies where they're bulletproof and can heal within seconds and they couldn't be touched. And now we're seeing him and Professor Xavier like basically peeing in their diapers and being drunk and having like no life at all. And basically just waiting for their time to end, which is almost kind of what I felt like Harrison's character was doing in this film. So I thought, and I will definitely express my opinion on how I thought Mangold did versus Spielberg in this movie later on. But as far as like one of the reasons I thought he probably was hired for this film is the fact that he's good at taking what we know as these unstoppable heroic heroes and breaking them down and showing that to an audience like that. And I thought starting off the film with a topless Harrison Ford and then going right into a scene where, again, we started off in Raiders where we have, students batting their eyes with messages on their eyelids versus now no one gives a crap about this guy. And what's so interesting about a scene like that is because we all are watching this movie and we're like, you guys have no idea how good you have it. Your teacher is friggin' Indiana Jones. And these runty little kids don't even understand the piece of treasure they have in front of them. And I thought that was a really interesting first couple minutes of the movie to break down what you're probably going in thinking, well, he's going to be kicking butt and doing all this heroic stuff. And you're like, oh no, he's an alcoholic and he's literally that get off my lawn neighbor, and he's naked and saggy and no one cares about him and his students. And it's like, I thought, wow, that's something I actually really appreciated about the film. Sorry, I can't say film. It's first digital Indiana Jones film. So I cannot say film, but this content, but I thought it was a very interesting way to start the movie for sure. That's one of the few things I have to say about it.
I agree. I mean, even in his retirement, where they're giving him his gold clock,
that's so funny.
He what's he say? Thanks for putting up with me.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can tell that he's not well liked, and he is a grumpy old man at this point. And I agree with you, Deke. I think that was, I think that was purposeful and brave of Harrison Ford and of James Mangold to do it, and it was effective. It was very good.
To the clock point, I thought it was hilarious that they gave him that gold clock. Because you think of all the things that have gone through his hands, and they give him this little gold clock. He hasn't had the Ark of the Covenant. He's had the Holy Grail.
He's had the cup of Christ in his hands.
Yes, exactly. And a gold clock.
Which he promptly hands off to a homeless guy.
Yeah, and there was a trash can in that scene. I wonder if they did a take of that with him throwing it in the trash can.
Very possible. Let me ask you guys this. We put aside some dodgy deep fake in the beginning. I thought the first 20 minutes were probably the best Indiana Jones movie since 1989. It felt to me like an Indiana Jones movie. And I think this was Mangold saying, okay, well, you're going to get something very different here in about half an hour, but here you go. here's one more episode of Indy in his prime fighting Nazis in World War II. And I ate it up. I thought it was great. I mean,
I agree. I mean, Indy was always at his best when he was fighting the Nazis. And Mangold certainly filled this movie with a lot of fan service in a lot of different ways, you know, from the whole deepfake first part with the fighting the actual Nazis to even taking him to Morocco and putting him into a desert, you know, Middle East chase scene, you know, like these are very familiar things for Indiana Jones that were quite a departure in Crystal Skull. He brought it back, brought a lot back in this. He gave Sala a good bit, which I didn't realize, you know, I was reading about the Crystal Skull the other day. I didn't realize that John Rhys Davies declined a cameo in Crystal Skull because that's all they offered him. And he felt that the character deserved a bigger piece of it because,
and so he said, yes, I'll come back as a cab driver.
But you know what? He I think he had a pretty good role, pretty important role in the movie. And
I liked Sala's part in this.
I did too.
And it sort of broke my heart a little bit. I was telling Brian about this the other day. You know, he drops him at the airport and he's like, I brought my passport. And he's like, you know, Sala, I can't. And then Sala sort of pleadingly says, you know, everything that he misses about the old days. And I thought that was just a really great moment because, again, we're not dealing with young men anymore. These are guys in their 70s who are like, you know, Sala's like, I'm driving this cab now. But man, you know, I was the best digger in Egypt 50 years ago. That part for me it pulled on the heartstrings and it worked for me. And it's, you know, it's always a pleasure to see John Rhys Davies again. And apparently the cameo they offered him in Indy 4 was I read an interview with him a few years ago. He's like, they wanted to put me in a blue studio and set me in a chair and say, congratulations, Indy. He was going to be at the wedding, but they were just going to film him by himself in a blue screen studio. And he was just going to be there going, congratulations.
That's what I think he made the right choice.
Probably so. Interesting that Indy helped Sala come over during the war.
Yeah.
And so that's I always like these little bits of history of the Indiana Jones series that get filled in by these things.
Mm-hmm.
So
I will say, like, if we can touch base on it later, it doesn't have to be now, but I will say, as far as fan service, that I'd like to touch base again on maybe not just the John Rhys Davies, but that is one small thing. Like, I personally thought there was a little too much fan service and things like, you know, he only shows up twice in the film and then in the movie, and then the second time at the end, he's singing the exact same song as we heard him singing like 30 years ago. And for me, I just felt. It was just really weird and goofy to me that there was things like that, but that's just my personal opinion on it. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, Deke, thanks for calling us. We're going to let go of you. I'm just kidding. What were you going to say, Brian?
Oh, I was going to kind of shift gears a little bit off of Harrison and, you know, Davies and just go to Mads Mikkelsen, man. That guy was an awesome Nazi. I thought he was great. I like Mads in this role. Yeah. I thought he was pretty sinister, and he definitely had some he had an interesting part to play, and I think he kind of established the way he is in a scene of mine I really like. The beginning of the movie when he's in a hotel and then the black server comes up to him and he's like, where are you from? Where are your people from? He's like, well, I was born by the Yankee Stadium. And he's like, did you fight in the war? He's like, yes, I did. And are you enjoying your victory? And that guy's just like sitting there looking at him. And then he finishes the conversation saying, you didn't win the war. Hitler lost it. And I was like, man, what a great guy.
I I don't know if I'm going to end up being the flip side of the coin on every opinion on this, but I'll go ahead and say I have a huge man crush on Mads Mikkelsen, and I felt like everyone else, every other character in this movie, he was another bland character. I'll be honest with you, I did like that scene, Jared. I did like that scene, but like every other scene in this movie, it was just okay. He even says it in that scene. Then he establishes that he is going to be a character that wants to outdo Hitler. Okay, to just say that out loud, he should have been way more evil. Like anybody who thinks that Hitler is a puss really, really, really should have been portrayed way, way, way more evil. And throughout the film, he was doing like weird things, like the black CIA agent, female agent who he had to like hold her hand and was like begging her like one last time, like I'm begging you one last time before, because he knows he's getting ready to kill her. But I'm like, somebody who's trying to step in and assassinate Hitler so they can take over where Hitler failed because they want to do a better job than Hitler. That person is pure satanic evil. And I think once again, Disney has taken Mads Mikkelsen and placed them in another bland character. So I just want to put that out there, that I think he could have gone way, way, way more for the fences instead of just the, in my opinion, bland character that he portrayed in the film.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't disagree with that either. I think they were trying to play up the mathematician side of him too much. Like, he's done the calculations, he's done the math, he understands that, X plus Y equals the Third Reich. And that's how he was approaching it. He wasn't approaching it like a madman or like a military, general who was going to change everything. He was approaching it from a mathematician's point of view.
But he's dedicating his entire life to taking up where Hitler like left the baton on the racetrack. Are you kidding me? Like that?
I'm not disagreeing with you.
He should have been way worse.
He's
way
basically
worse.
Cold and calculating.
Yes, because
and
I think that's why he was playing it like that, because Hitler was insane.
Yeah, he's playing the game.
But it also points out, and they stress over and over, it's all about the math. It's all about the math. And ironically, at the end, he got the math wrong. And that's why they went back to, the Battle of Syracuse. But
they got faked out.
Well,
I need to see a scene where he realized that Indiana Jones, says you're going the wrong way or your directions are wrong. I need to see him like pounding the table 9. It's like I need to see some kind of like hatred coming out of this very evil, more evil than Hitler character.
His henchman was a lot more evil than him. I'll tell you that. That guy,
and that one dude was huge.
Was that guy even real?
I know, right?
I kept thinking, man, this guy must be a CGI creation. He was gigantic.
And that's another thing. I have so many like bland issues with this movie, is that like, we've had so many films where small little Indiana Jones takes on the big muscular character. And I was like, all right, cool. We're going to get another awesome fight. And then he gets killed by the kid by drowning. And there were so many like,
although I thought
that was clever.
That death was pretty hardcore, though.
I'm not gonna lie. I actually expected that guy to emerge dragging that piece of gate with him, soaking wet. I really did. I thought he was just gonna keep coming. So
that would have been cool too.
I was surprised that he was killed. Believe it or not, I'm like, oh, that's how he died. And I actually thought he was gonna like reappear and be a problem later, and he's still dragging this thing with a handcuff on. But no, he didn't. He's
Can I touch on one last thing before we move off of Jürgen Baller? How in the hell did he survive getting smacked in the face on that runner
with that
train?
Yeah, I know, right?
Coming out with, again, I have a man crush on this guy, to come out with his yet perfect face again, not a scratch on it. Like,
I know.
What the heck, dude? I thought
they should have caved his face in a little bit or something.
Yeah, give him like some kind of like the villain from Skyfall, like scarring or something, dude. Like, not even a missing tooth, like nothing. He just came back like perfectly. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I watching? A Roadrunner cartoon? That was over the top. Come on, man. He got hit by like a piece of metal baseball bat on a speeding train.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Indiana Jones survived a nuclear explosion in a fridge. What series are you watching?
Come on, man.
Man, you ever watch that? How
I
it should
thought
have
him
ended?
Surviving with the noose around his neck was even more over the top than the fridge.
That was that could have been played up a little more too. Like, it looked like he was still in a lot of control.
That's
he
why
should have been like.
That's why his voice changed, because he had a hoarse voice from being hung.
Right.
Yeah, no,
was
it's
before he had that thing around his neck.
The movie's not perfect. The characters aren't perfect. And I agree with you about the Mad. You know, he certainly could have played that role up a lot more. Look, Indiana Jones the series is replete with fairly one-dimensional characters, not just the main heavy, but like the henchmen and whatnot. And I'm okay with that. And you know, but when you think about even the main bad guy, let's go back to like The Last Crusade. You know, he was a very kind of like two-dimensional character, but not a lot of third dimension in him. He was
talking about Donovan.
Yeah. I mean, Donovan played up his playboy rich guy kind of thing, but he was always the same kind of thing throughout the whole thing. And
but I felt like man, I forget the very attractive Irish actress's name, but Duty,
Alison
Duty. I thought she was the main villain. She did much better job of playing both of the Joneses against each other. She was both playing the Nazis and the Jones. I thought she was the best villain in there. So
I agree 100%.
So.
Yeah, she was great. But But
why don't we
switch gears?
Down, Jared, down.
Why don't we switch gears and talk about the CG, you know, and now the green screen. Why don't we jump into it? Let's just
okay.
That's Deke's favorite.
I do have a complaint about. Okay, you see Indy running on top of the train.
Oh God, Brian,
that looked like 80-year-old Harrison Ford running on the train.
That looked like Polar Express to me. That was terrible.
I didn't even think terrible. I didn't think that guy looked real.
Yeah, even my wife was like, that looks just totally fake. And I couldn't tell if it was just, you know, Harrison doing his own stunt work on a green screen and, you know, dragging his 80-year-old legs behind him or whatever. But something just seemed really off about that to me. And it goes back to, you know, if he was doing his own work on that, then they made a mistake and should have had a stunt person do it.
I'll tell you what, before we really tear into all the effects in this movie, I think it's fair to look back at at Raiders, Temple of Doom, and The Last Crusade. And if you watch those now, there are all kinds of wonky effects. All over it.
There was one thing that really fit in though with that. It makes the film kind of fit in. When they're going down the hill in the motorcycle with the little sidecar and the background and all that, it looked like an 80s green screen.
But that's kind of like what it is.
Right in. Yeah.
Like when I show those movies, the older movies to my son, he's probably going to be like, "The hell am I watching?" Because I mean, there's, especially when you get to Temple of Doom, there's all kinds of crazy mismatched off synced effects that are happening, and you just kind of power through it and
the
you
stop motion top stuff through the tunnel and the mine cars and
But the thing is, the movies from the 80s, you know, the differences, and I've actually had this conversation with Jared, you know, talking about RoboCop and some other, you know, movies, but you know, they did use those effects, but they were still using effects like matte paintings, and they were still using practical effects. And that's what, you know, I don't mind special effects when it's used as a tool and it's intermixed with practical effects, but there was no practical effects. And this is one thing I talked to Jared, you know, after we saw the movie and we were texting back and forth. But, you know, one of the issues I have is like, if you look at the past movies, you can't hold a candle to things like a realistic boulder chasing after you, or Indiana, like cutting a bridge in half, a real bridge in half. Or him on horseback taking on an entire tank. Like those sequences compared to every single action sequences that was in this movie was so soft and blurry, and you could tell every single scene which shot had like green screen, and it wasn't just because it was shot digitally, but like the difference between the plasticky look of the digital effects in this movie versus the very tangible, realistic sequences I saw in the first three amazing action movies in this series. Like it's just night and day. And I think, and I'm sure that there are some people who, when they're judging this movie, they want to say, well, you can't judge this by the other three films, and that there is a train of thought to that, and I somewhat agree to that a little bit, because I sometimes have defended movies like Godfather 3. Is it a good movie compared to the other two? No, but standing on its own, it's not a bad film actually. But You have to understand that this movie is eventually going to come out in a box set and packaged with the other movies that have the title Indiana Jones at the top. And so I do, in my opinion, have to judge this by the other three films. And they could have done things like practical effects, and they didn't do, in my opinion, one single practical effect that really looked real to me, in my opinion.
I agree. And listen, hey, let's take we talked about it earlier, a recent movie like Maverick, which excelled at practical effects and, cinematography and classic filmmaking. And they did it very well. And it was expensive, just like this movie was expensive. And it took time and it took effort. And, it's really how far are they willing to go to do it the classical way versus kind of like the shortcut way. But I'll tell you this, the irony is it's just as expensive to do the CG effects these days. It's unbelievably expensive to do this stuff. So you're kind of, one hand or the other. Are you going to spend the money and go practical and make it real and make it expensive and location shoots? Or are you going to make it expensive, but keep it, siloed out and in one spot where you don't have to go anywhere? So it's
just like the movie. It's not that I hate the action sequences. They're fun sequences. They're just okay. That's where it is. And I do want to get right back to what we're talking about, because I think this is a very deep subject to talk about as far as the special effects. And I actually want to back up to the de-aging. But, you just talked about how expensive. But this movie cost $300 million. And I'll be honest with you, I did not see that up on the screen. Where that money got spent, I have no idea. But
I think there was a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor.
Jeez, man. I did not see $300
like 2 or 3 different
million.
movies there, maybe.
Yeah. If we can back up to the de-aging, you guys, everyone has talked about how that was one of the best sequences. Jared, you listed it as probably the best action sequence in an Indiana Jones film you've seen in decades. But, the whole thing is, deep faked, does that, and I have to ask you guys your opinion on this, like, does it bother you guys that the best action sequence in the movie really isn't even Harrison Ford? Does that bother you?
For me, if as being a person who was invested in the story, with full awareness of what I was watching, which is Mangold doing his best Spielberg's greatest hits reel. I'm able to divorce that. That wasn't always Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford was present for some of that stuff shot, because I've seen pictures from behind the scenes. But yeah, a lot of that was a younger man as a body double with Harrison Ford wearing Harrison Ford's face. But for me, that is, as a person who is watching the film, to me, that's Indiana Jones. Just like when I watch some modern Star Wars these days, I know that when I see a young Mark Hamill now in a new Star Wars show, that's not Mark Hamill. It looks just like him, but it's not him. It's Luke Skywalker. It's not Mark Hamill. And I'm sort of able to have that cognitive dissonance there. Like, okay, this is Indiana Jones. It's maybe not Harrison Ford, but it's Indiana Jones. That's not Mark Hamill, but it's Luke Skywalker.
You know what, Jared? You had me at story. You kind of convinced me, so I'll shut up. But I will ask this question, though. I do have a follow-up question, because again, I don't have a problem with younger actors portraying other people. And if you compare the train sequence from Last Crusade, the best Indiana Jones movie ever, if you compare that and how it was shot and how practical effects it was, and the fact you had this amazing actor in River Phoenix portraying and doing his take on Indiana Jones versus a very plasticky, very CGI, very special effects heavy in the action and their own opening train sequence, I just thought that Last Crusade destroyed the opening train sequence of this movie. But Jared, you did convince me back at story, so okay, I'll shut up. So.
Wow, holy crap!
And I don't admit when I'm wrong too often.
I could actually.
I'm going to sign off now. I'm done.
I was actually thinking I could go and watch an entire feature film with deep fake Indiana Jones.
However,
it has to be done right.
Okay, and I'll say this as we're talking about the technology. Of course, they de-aged, or they had a a deep fake Mark Hamill in Mandalorian season 2.
Mhm.
It's been heavily criticized. It doesn't look great. However, they brought this de-aged. They brought a young Luke Skywalker back for an episode of the Book of Boba Fett, and he looked flawless. Now, the voice was a bit of a problem, but the way this Luke Skywalker looked was, okay, that's Mark Hamill right after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with the deep fake there. But I wonder how the same company, Lucasfilm, goes from that Mark Hamill, almost flawless, to a wildly inconsistent Indiana Jones. Now, I will say, I think there are, even though I know it's a trick and I'm watching a magic trick, there are times where Dial of Destiny, Young Indy, they nailed it. It's 100%. Like, it looks perfect. But there are times when it's way off.
That might answer your budget question. Where'd the $300 million go? So, I mean, everything takes time to render, right? Everything takes its time and money. And that the whole movie from basically the start to the finish is nothing but special effects. And it takes just to get a frame rendered like this in a movie like this with a scale like this takes forever. And it's money and it's time. So they have to find some spots where they have to pull time back. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of those shots weren't as rendered as some other deepfake shots that you're looking at, because they had to save time and work on different parts of the project.
Well, here's what's going to happen. 24 hours after this is released on home video, some YouTuber is going to do a perfect version of it with the AI voice.
It'll be amazing when they do it, by the way.
Yes.
And that's and I'll say it now. This isn't coming out on home video for months, probably. But my prediction is the day after it hits, as soon as somebody gets a high-res version of this movie, they're going to start working on that, and they're going to beat what ILM did in that film with using consumer-grade software.
Yeah, in their mother's basement.
Yes.
But let me ask you a question, and I didn't watch that episode of Mandalorian, but or much of them. But if they had projected that episode of Mandalorian up on a Dolby cinema screen, would you see a lot more of the flaws, do you think? Or on the flip side, is Dial of Destiny going to look better on home video because you're watching it on a smaller screen? I mean, when you see it,
it's possible.
When you see it's, portrayed on like 100-foot screen, you're going to notice every flaw. Whether I liked it or not, I will say that's the best, that's the best de-aging I've seen ever in a film. I mean, I still don't know if it's correct. If you're asking my opinion, I will still always choose a River Phoenix or someone else portraying that, so I don't have to sit there and concentrate on it, because, the truth of the matter is not only are you and I and everyone on this podcast having this conversation, everybody else in the world is having this exact same conversation. And Disney should have known that going into this, because we all have found the cracks and the crevices and the issues in the deep fake first 20 minutes of the film. And that's pretty much what everyone's been talking about on the reviews and stuff like that. And so they knew handing it in that it wasn't perfect, and you shouldn't be handing in on an Indiana Jones film anything where they're like, well, we did our best, we'll see what people think about it.
That's mystifying to me, because you've got film editors, trained visual effects editors, sitting in dark rooms with gigantic OLED screens right in front of them. They see what we see. There's no way they don't. And there's guys sitting in that room going, that's about 70% there. I guess it's good enough. Let's just keep moving.
Yeah, I think for general audiences, it probably is. For
sure,
the average audience, moviegoer, it's probably great. My wife was like, "That was awesome."
Yeah,
and then and I was like, "Well, it has some holes in it."
Well, Terry, she was at the screening with me, Deke, and Brian. Well, as soon as they pulled that hood off DH'd Indy, she was, oh God.
Yes, that's exactly her reaction.
She's like, oh, he's so hot.
I heard
it. I was like, well, there he is. I was like, you're swooning.
I kind of chuckled.
Zeros, right? But anyway, that is Deke, your point is well made.
And so is yours, Jared.
Well, I'm just saying, when you get Indy, when you want somebody to play a 13-year-old Indy, absolutely, you can't. But they were portraying Indy 6 years after Last Crusade, so I think there was just some expectation that it would be, we'd be seeing the Harrison, and I know that's what they were doing. They're like, we got to give them one more little episode with, the Harrison that they remember from.
See, the funny thing for me is that the de-aging part didn't really bother me that much, because you obviously know it's de-aging, and I just kind of like accepted it, that this is what it is. It was the voice. The voice bothered me the whole time, because Brian's point, it was old Harrison's voice in this younger de-aged body, which I'm like, and the first thing I thought about, like, they have all this voice technology, all this voice stuff that they could have done for a better Harrison Ford young voice. But I hear is the grizzled old, Harrison Ford. And I'm like, that's not right. They could have, like, this would have been an easy thing to like put in, which they've done all over the place. To your point, Val Kilmer's, documentary, perfect example. They easily could have done.
Just wait 3 months and you'll see.
And I'm looking forward to that, because it's going to be pretty great when I watch it. So,
okay,
on your cell phone.
All right, looks awesome on a cell phone.
So we're not going to be. So this podcast will not.
Yeah, next time Matt watches on a cell phone, he's like, "What are you talking about? There's no issue with the de-aging."
Perfect de-aging.
Shut up!
Wow, this was awesome.
I watched it on my watch, my iWatch. It's great.
And did you see how he handed Marion that pregnancy test?
Mutt, that was Mutt. She kept it all these years.
Too.
Well, while we're talking about special effects, why don't we jump to the end and talk about the battle that we went in? What do we think about that?
Okay, let's go around the table here. Brian, tell me what you thought about the ending.
I thought that end battle was kind of weird. I mean, you're sitting there, you all of a sudden, you think you're going to go back to Nazi Germany, and then all of a sudden you go to, I was almost as shocked as Mad's character, He
was like, no. Oh, wait. We can't be here. We got to turn around. Turn around.
Be here. But no, it was kind of interesting. For me, it was more about Indy's reaction, and at the end of that sequence, and how he handled that, and how he wanted to be there, and all that. That kind of overshadows what was going on. But it was kind of fascinating with them calling the planes dragons and all that stuff, and injecting semi-modern warfare into ancient warfare. That was kind of crazy.
Like blowing them away with machine guns.
Yeah, exactly. But then they managed to take down that plane with all those arrows, and it looked like Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it's reeked of Game of Thrones, like, them shooting the big arrows at the dragons. Yeah. That's exactly what they were doing. And I was like, they must have stolen that idea.
Well, Deke.
I just wanted to say, as far as like the time travel aspect of the movie, I've heard a lot of people having issues with that, and I actually didn't have a problem with that. I mean, if you look at the history of how the Indiana Jones movies have ended, I think that kind of fits in. I didn't have a problem with the time travel. That being said, I want to be very clear. If this was a Disney invention, and they're doing this because later on down the line, they want to multi-universe this crap, or they want to somehow completely go de-aged Indiana Jones and bring him back for yet another slapped on, slap it and put it in the movie theater and get more money out of us. If that's the reason the time travel was invented, I'm going to be very upset. But if it's just for the storyline, and that's how they went in the movie, and we never see another Indiana Jones film again, I was totally okay with the time travel thing. But I cannot make it more clear that I'm not a Disney fan. And if they did this for multiverse, or to bring him back somehow to get more money out of me, I'm not okay with that. So just want to put that out there.
Okay.
But as far as the ending of the film, I didn't have a problem with it at all. I might probably have a different opinion, guys, on this, but as far as Helena punching him and forcing him to go back to current times, again, like the rest of the movie, it's not that I hated it. It just wasn't my preferred way of ending the film. And personally, I thought that he should have stayed in the past because, right or wrong, I think this movie should have ended as an Indiana Jones film. And for 5 movies, he has made it very clear, no offense to Marion or anybody else that he has been with or been in love with. And I know the fans want to see the reunion of Marion and some of his other past loves and stuff, but he has made it very clear that his drug of choice is history. And he has always wanted to chase history. He has always chosen history over love. Even like at the end of Last Crusade, his father had to tell him to let go of the cup of Christ. It's other people telling him, like pulling him away, like he is addicted to drugs. He is addicted to history. He has always been in search of another adventure in history. And I think that he should have had his way. He wanted to stay. And I think it would have been cool if we would have given him his final wish on the 5th and final chapter to let him stay in history and let history unfold in front of him realistically. He's read about it in books. He's seen pictures of it. And I think for him to be able to sit there dying, he's 80. How much longer does he have? Let him just have his final wish and just be able to sit there and watch realistic history unfold in front of him. And I think that would have been a better ending. So that's where I'm at on that. That being said, him being able to reunite with Marion, and they had the kissing the boo-boo sequence. Even an ice cold bastard like myself, that kind of melted me a little bit. So it's fine. And just like everything else in this movie, I was okay with everything that happened. It just wasn't great to me. But I personally feel as though he should have stayed in the past, and because that's what Indiana Jones is addicted to, is adventure and history.
So when I was watching that scene, what I was thinking is, what I want her, Helena, and the kid to get back to the present. And what I wanted was him to be left in the past. And I wanted her to go back and find like an ancient like relief of an Indiana Jones, a hieroglyphic with a whip and the hat somewhere.
Or they find his hat.
No, it's like I wanted to see like some kind of mural or some kind of ancient hieroglyph with Indiana
He's chased
Jones.
legends his entire life. I wanted him to be one of the legends.
Yes, that's all. And then he got punched in the face. I'm like, oh, I guess that's not going to happen. And I was upset about that. I was disappointed because that's what I wanted to see in Indiana Jones. That's how I wanted to see it, with the big John Williams, farewell music going out for Indiana Jones, that nice hieroglyphic or something from the past, that he is a legend of history himself. But no, didn't happen. Yeah, and to your point, I didn't mind the Marion reunion. It was fine, but I would have liked the other one better.
Yeah. One thing, I felt like the punch was a bit disrespectful. A young woman smacking Indiana Jones and knocking him out. I mean,
you mean all the previous times where she left him for dead a couple times previously in the film wasn't enough, but her
right.
slapping
here she smacks him in the face. And, yeah, but the one thing about this movie that's different than all the others, he actually gets to keep the object of the movie, which is, at least he got to keep the object.
It's at his bedside.
It's gonna be great when he's old and senile and trying to go to, dial up something on, like he's going on a trip to Florida, to like Tampa, Florida on the Pan Am, and he's using the dial of destiny all of a sudden.
I kind of wish I had that coming home the other day.
The only thing I was going to say is, obviously, if Indiana Jones was to stay in the past, he would have changed time, which I'm not cool with, but it would have been kind of cool. I think.
Well, how do you know that that's how time was always supposed to be?
Correct. But wouldn't it have been cool if Helena went back to present time, she took over teaching at the class, and now they're in the textbooks and they're reading about this legendary fedora wearing some guy? That would have been a kind of cooler ending.
Would have been amazing. Would have been amazing.
We're rewriting it right now, Matt. So wait a second. Back to the classroom thing. Why did he not ask who this random person was in his classroom when she was answering all the questions?
There's only 15 people in there, and this person, he's never seen her.
He's already talked to the Syracuse girl and addressed her by her first name. He knows all the students' name in that classroom, and now all of a sudden, this like basketball female is like is in the back of his classroom answering every one of his questions, and he doesn't say, "And you are."
Well, he's probably just happy for the interest. He's like, "Oh, somebody's talking to me. Great."
But sorry, I want to hear Jared's opinion on the ending. Sorry about that.
Okay, so when the ending started, when you see the fissure opening up, I was like, are they? And I was curious. I was like, they're taking this big swing? And then when they come through and all the engines shut off and they start following, and then they get power back. and Indy looks out the window and sees the Roman ships. I was like, at that point I was in. I was like, oh man, this is amazing. And then they cut to the shot of that German plane flying low over those ships, and I was like, this is a great shot. I mean, it was so interesting to me, just the juxtaposition of this technology and ancient, and that's kind of stuff always interests me. And I was like, holy crap. And that now they're actually fighting the ships, and the ship is shooting these giant spears at the airplane and, knocking people out of the doorway. And I thought, man, this movie just, it went ape shit at the end. And I was like, okay, this is, I am all in on this. And, you guys may have changed my mind a little bit, but like you, it's always nice to see Karen Allen. I love that. And, I really love seeing them together, but I can see why people would have a problem with him being punched in the face. And so what, is he knocked out for like 5 days while he goes to the hospital? Because he's
apparently.
Obviously had medical attention. He's bandaged up and he's on bed rest. Was he just out that whole time? She must have a heck of a punch. I think for me, the ending, I liked the ending. Like I said, that doesn't mean I wouldn't have appreciated some sort of post credits, possibly with Kehu Kwan discovering Indy's tomb and finding a desiccated old fedora hat and saying, Indy, something, missed opportunities. But I really enjoyed the whole sequence. Just like, him talking to Archimedes, I thought was really cool. And Archimedes, like, you were always supposed to be here. And they did explain that the dial is a closed loop type of thing. It only goes one place. It only goes to him.
So I got a question. Does it only open up in the sky though? Because boy, if anyone discovered the Dial of Destiny pre the Wright brothers, can you imagine putting your life on the line and going through a million adventures, finally getting that damn clock back together and being like, oh man, damn it, like looking up in the sky.
Get there.
I can't even get up there.
Yeah, it's probably
a great point
to dwell on such things. But you're right. If you do that pre-Wright brothers,
someone invent a hot air balloon ASAP.
That's funny. Which I did enjoy the Wright brothers joke in the movie. Did you go to school with the Wright brothers? they were from the Civil War. Which that was pretty good. But so this podcast isn't as long as the Dial of Destiny. We probably should start landing the plane here.
Can we talk about the running time?
Sure. Let's go around and we'll give our final thoughts. And Deke, talk about the running time.
Well, that's not my final thought, but I wanted to get your guys' opinion on that because, just real fast. I know you guys want to, like you said, start landing the plane, and you want the credits to roll here. But I thought there were some sequences that really could have been plucked out of this movie. I think this movie had some pacing issues.
Yeah.
If you guys want to talk real quick about who would have done a better job, Spielberg or Mangold, we can touch on that real fast. But as far as running time, things that could have been taken out, I know right off the bat, the ex-boyfriend of Helena Shaw sequence went nowhere for me. Did nothing to advance the plot. We didn't even see that character come back again. It's like, in any other film where the ex-boyfriend is a problem in the beginning of the movie and then we don't hear about him for 2 hours, he usually pops back in like later on, like, right at the most inopportune time where they put, the Dial of Destiny back together and everything's going great and the happy ending is about to happen. And all of a sudden that ex-boyfriend thing that happened 2 hours prior, like pops up and, and ruins everything. But he never came back. So I'm like, what was the point of that whole entire action sequence? You know what I mean? Like there was almost too much action in this action movie. And I just felt like there were sequences like that. I thought the whole entire kid subplot line, like I didn't care for the kid. He was underwritten. He did nothing to advance the plot, but there was like a lot of things I felt that they could have taken out that really could have trimmed it down and made it a more enjoyable, especially for the running time.
I'll tell you one of the main sequences that I thought was they made it important in the movie, which I think they could have taken out of the story completely and would have been fine, was the Last Crusade looking for the Knight's Tomb inscription. You know, where they had to take that extra diving sequence to go down and find the extra piece in wax and melt it. And that whole sequence to me, they made important, but I felt they could have taken the whole plot line out and saved yourself 30 minutes in the movie and done it other ways, because I felt the Dial of Destiny didn't need the marker to go find. We did this in Last Crusade. You know, we don't have to do that in this. And it was still, to me, kind of confusing when they found the damn marker.
Well, they did it in Raiders too. The headpiece of the Staff of Ra was also a marker on the way to the Ark.
But that was a much quicker sequence.
And
much tighter.
And this is a part in the movie the first time where I was getting lost. Like, I didn't know what they were doing. Like I was like, aren't they looking for? So the dial was broken in half. So now they have to go find a map to the other half. So what this expedition is. And Antonio Banderas apparently just said, "Hey, just put me in this movie. You don't have to pay me." Because
you can even kill me.
I mean, he was in it for like 10 minutes and he hardly did anything.
Mm-hmm. And then the codex comes up and it has a code on it that is supposed to be a diversion somehow.
It's very convoluted.
Then you melt it, and then you get to the real piece of metal, which has like, I don't know.
How about the fact that the first 20 minutes was about finding this lance that turns out was a fake. And then like, oh, by the way, I happened to stumble upon this thing called the Dial of Destiny. I'm like, so what did we do the first 20 minutes for? You know what I mean? Like, literally, some of the things in this movie, like, were like, I didn't understand why they were put in there. It didn't advance the story at all.
Something that got completely dropped is that Indiana Jones is a fugitive from justice.
Yeah, he's wanted for murder.
Yeah,
and I was like, well, did they just sort of forget about that?
Yeah. Like right after the kissy boo boo sequence at the end, did cops attack him?
Yeah,
they're like, attack him to the ground.
Like Henry Jones. Come
all
out
the people responsible for that are in 200 BC.
That's true. He has no alibi. Well, if you go to Athens and you look, their bones are there.
Let's crank up the dial and go back and find these guys' corpses on the ground in a burning airplane.
Okay.
I did want to say one thing, you know, if I came off like negative on this podcast, I apologize. But one sequence I really did care for. And again, I'm not big on retreads. I'd rather a movie kind of find its own way and do its own thing. So some of the sequences in this movie that I felt like were marrying previous movies and kind of doing a greatest hits, wasn't a big fan of that. But one of the few times that this movie did a greatest hits and kind of twisted it on its own was the underwater sequence. And I thought that was my favorite sequence in the whole movie. And I just want to give a shout out to that because we hadn't had an underwater sequence in any of the Indiana Jones movies. I thought it was very terrifying. I thought it was the most nail biting sequence in the movie. And on top of that, they, in their own way, they took the snakes and they twisted that and made it into eels. And then on top of that, I was like, well, how are they going to get the torches? And then they have the underwater torches too. And I was like, oh man, that's brilliant. So I just wanted to say kudos to the underwater sequence because I really enjoyed that part of the movie a lot.
Nice. Yeah, you're right. The only underwater sequence in any Indiana Jones movie. Very cool. Yeah. Well, so final thoughts, final words as we prepare to fly back into the fissure and go back to the 25th century with the Dial of Destiny.
Brian?
I'll just say that, like I said at the beginning, overall, I enjoyed it. It's a good popcorn flick. It's not, the best thing I've ever seen. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. I do like it better than Crystal Skull though. But I think it missed the Spielberg touch. I think it missed that. And it's hard to put your finger on it, but he just has a way of making you, I guess, I'll care a little bit more. And that might not have been there, but it was solid. I mean, it has its flaws, but I'd probably give it about 3.5 out of 5 or something.
Deke.
Yeah, I mean, just to tag on to what Brian was saying, I think Spielberg probably would have been a better choice. He probably made the right decision not doing this one. I do like Mangold. 3:10 to Yuma is probably my favorite Western in the past 15 years. But I think Spielberg's timing with his comedy and when to do punchlines and how to connect and make action part of the comedy, he's really good at that. I never got a sequence where Harrison's got malaria and he just wants to shoot the guy who's flipping the sword around. Like there's some things I think Spielberg would have brought into this episode of the series, but all in all, I have been very right down the line about my opinion on this movie, and I have not changed since this podcast started. But I have to say that out of all the things that we've talked about in this movie, the one person I cannot blame is Harrison Ford. I feel like the writing was weak by the Mrs. Butterworth brothers or whatever the hell their name is, and I feel like James Mangold has to take a little bit of responsibility for this one. And if he was being pressured by Kathleen Kennedy, I don't know, because there was so many things in here that could have been done better. And had he had a little more free range and probably not been, probably being touched down with a committee, I just felt like this movie was just very bland all around. But as far as the person who came through and did the best with the material they had, it's Harrison Ford. At 80 years old, the guy was kicking ass, plain and simple. He brought great acting. He probably did the best acting out of all 5 movies in this movie. And I don't know anyone else who could do what he was doing at 80 and be so bold to go topless. I don't know any other 80-year-old who would have done that. And so I can't blame him for this movie. The movie's just okay. It's not bad. I will say, like you said, Jared, and I think Brian, you said this too, but it's like I went and saw it a second time, and all in all, even though I didn't have a great experience watching it, as far as my opinion, I will say the second time I watched it, I was like, I'm settling back. I knew what to expect, and I was like, this is kind of cool. I'm watching an Indiana Jones movie up on the big screen again. How can I complain? So I did have fun. I do like the film. And I will say, when the box set eventually comes out, I would actually watch it again. So that definitely is something more that I can say for Crystal Skull, because I have not watched that, and I still own the 4K, and it has not left its packaging yet. But like I said, I can't blame Harrison. He did a great job in this movie, plain and simple.
Yeah, I agree with both you, Brian and Deke. And I have to say, this movie, unlike the Crystal Skull, where I felt he was in the Crystal Skull a little too old to be doing some of the purported stunts that Indiana Jones was doing at the time. It was a little unbelievable for me in Crystal Skull. I felt we got the age appropriate Indy in this movie. And I went along with the age appropriate Indy the entire time. I felt that, I felt what my biggest miss was, and I haven't listened to the score independently yet, but the music didn't blow me away. And every Indiana Jones movie, the first 3 had amazing music cues and amazing music sequences, and nothing really stood out. And even when I kind of was like, oh, well, this is going to be a big moment for music, I never felt that I got it. And I felt that was part of what was keeping this movie feeling very ordinary and average to me.
Matt, I just want to say, I totally agree with you, man. So sorry to interrupt you, but I really missed like a sequence like this, the spikes coming down in Temple of Doom. I mean, there's some really heavy drum beat scores that he's done for the Indiana Jones where you're like, oh my God, how is he going to get out of this one next? And I felt like John Williams, who is the master, I don't think like this was his best entry. So sorry to interrupt you, but I totally agree with you on that.
No, but things like that, push this movie down a notch. But I have to say, going on this, like I said, age appropriate Indiana Jones, to see him out like this, if this is going to be his last movie, I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I don't walk away disappointed. I'm happy for the character. I'm happy that I got another movie with Indiana Jones. And I don't feel that it was a ridiculous movie putting him in ridiculous situations like Crystal Skull. So I felt this was the right kind of movie. In fact, if they had made this movie, the shame of it is that this movie made 13 years ago in place of Crystal Skull with a little more time and Spielberg behind it might have been a better way to end Indy's journey instead of having to go into a 5th film. But that said, hey, look, I'm 48 years old and I got to see Indiana Jones again. So it's amazing that I get to see it. And then, I'm going to walk out. I'll probably see it again. I'd like to see it again one more time in the theater before it's gone. And that's a pretty amazing thing. So,
and you got to introduce your kid to it too.
And he didn't want to watch it until he saw the last movie. So you know what? It's a good thing. Indiana Jones holds up, is still one of my favorite movie characters of all time.
Yeah. And, I'm not getting down into the weeds too much here, but I, like Deke said, Harrison Ford, MVP, just having grown up with him, like as my hero, sitting in the theater as a man approaching 50 to be able to watch him one more time do that, some of my minor concerns fall away, and I just think about the good stuff. Indiana Jones is a character who I think people maybe of our age could aspire to, because he's 80. And we're like halfway there, a little over halfway there. But it's like, man, if Harrison Ford is doing this kind of stuff when he's 80, what's our excuse? So that's kind of where I'm at. The movie, perhaps it wasn't a present that was wrapped really pretty, but I think they put the bow on it very nicely. And I will say one thing about the score. I have listened to the score a couple of times in my car independently. The score is quite good, but I do agree that it is not as punchy in the film as it needs to be. I mean, I noticed the score when the Raiders March kicked in, like everybody else does. But I did find, after listening to the score by myself and then seeing it a second time, I could pick out these pieces of music, and it clicked better with me. But, and this is it. I mean, this could be the last John Williams score ever. And this is going to be the last Harrison Ford movie like this ever. So it's not an insignificant thing. It's unfortunate that it wasn't a grand slam, but I'm happy with what we got. So
yeah, one thing about Harrison is, you could, everything I've seen him in, you could count on a solid performance except for one thing, the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Gosh.
He's paying rent. He's paying rent back then.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was.
He no longer needs to pay rent. He's played plenty of rent. So
yeah.
But I want to thank. I'm glad we finally got all these great minds together. I want to thank Deke and Brian for coming on the show today and talking about this movie. It's unfortunate Mike couldn't be with us, but Mike is on his own journey. and maybe he'll get there eventually. But anyway, thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you. Hey, I wanted to say I wanted to say this on the microphone, but guys, I just finished up the James Bond episode you just did, and man, you killed it again. I had a blast listening to that, and it was great to have all the trivia that you guys knew about the Bond films. I'm a huge Bond fan, so I loved that episode. I just want to say that out loud.
Thanks, man.
Well, thanks. That's awesome.
Thank you guys, man. Fantastic.
All right.
YouTube wouldn't let us put that up, so I'm glad.
Yeah, I heard.
That was struck immediately. But
wow.
Anyway, Deke, I know we're going to be hearing you again soon on some Good, Bad, and Ugly episodies.
Yeah, I'm actually recording in a couple of days. I was Matt. I was telling Jared, you guys got to put me on retainer here soon, man. Like I'm doing two hyperspace podcasts in 1 week. What's up?
Hey, I made them give me a contract.
Yeah. Wait, they're paying you?
No,
Yeah, sure.
no. Listen, so
Hey, we got to sign off.
Yeah, I can't hear you. Oh, crap. And Brian, we'll have Brian and Lindsay back on soon. We got a new Star Wars TV show coming out here in a couple of weeks, Ahsoka. So we'll be doing some episodes about that. But gang, thanks for coming along on this globe-trotting adventure.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation, guys.
All right, Matt. So we need to leave Brian and Deke to their lives here in the 21st century. We got to get back to our tubes now in the 25th.
Yep. I'm going to dial up the dial of destiny and open up a portal and hopefully get them back to the right time frame. And we account for some continental drift, and we're not putting them back in caveman area.
Okay. All right. Well, gang, thanks you guys for joining us, and we will see you next time.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to The Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media. Leave us a review. And join us here next time as we take you into the 25th century.